take a mood or a feeling and we externalize it as an object, but then we take it on as being part of us. We take it on as being an identity. So we might say, you know, I feel sad, or I feel unhappy, I feel stressed, I feel depressed. And then we'll go to the doctor and they'll say, all right, you've got stress related issues, or you've got depression. And then we'll treat it as an external entity from us. So we'll treat the depression, or we'll treat the stress rather than the person being treated. And that's where we can then use the language of I am depressed or I am stressed, which then becomes part of our identity, especially if it's something that you're saying quite a lot. So if we think about just everyday language, how we communicate with each other, you know, especially in school, if in personal life as well, when we'll say, oh, I'm just really stressed, just even that sentence is creating that part of an identity for yourself. I'm stressed, I'm this, I'm that, whatever we have that I am, then we're kind of adding to our own personality. And it's a bit of a strange thing to think about. And as we go into this session, you'll kind of get where I'm coming from in terms of how we use language to determine who we think we are as a person. Because whoever we think we are, that's how we are then projecting out into the world. If we think back to a couple of sessions ago where I talked about the unconscious responding to whatever those thoughts are, and those thoughts are often determined by the language that we use, we are going to bring about what we think about. So if we use that language of I'm stressed, then, you know, that's a behavior you're talking about, but you're talking as it's your identity. And then this is where we can find ourselves being stressed all the time, not because we are stressed, but because we've created an identity around being stressed. So even on a day when actually we might not have been stressed out, we might have been absolutely fine, we can still find ourselves resorting to that stressful feeling. And because every time we'll say those words of I am, and when we're having that particular phrase at the end, I am stressed, we're then strengthening that neurological pathway every time. So we're strengthening that behavior. It's almost like it's becoming an automatic system that we're then running, especially if we say it long enough. Now, there's an argument in my industry of people saying it could be 30 days, it could be 90 days for this to then go through that anthropomorphication stage. And we're actually, there's also evidence that's shown that it can happen in 1 or 2 sentences. The minute you tell somebody that I am this, then it's almost like you have to keep that pretense up, especially if you're saying it to work colleagues. Every time you see that particular individual, you might respond in that same stressful behavior that you were in last time you seen them, even if there's nothing kind of happening. Does that kind of make sense? You know how young people will act in certain ways. It's really obvious with young people. I only bring that up as a reference because it's not that obvious in adults, although some it is. In young people, you'll see them responding differently to different students, depending on who they're hanging around with. You'll see a change in their behavior. Well, obviously adults do that as well. And it's generally stemmed from the language that we've used to describe ourselves to this particular person. Anyway, hope that makes sense. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're just going to straight away get into a nice comfortable position, because we're not going to be moving around much for this, but you might want to have your hands free. So if you're holding on to your device or whatever, just pop it down. Have your neck and shoulders and your spine and everything comfortable, because we're not going to be moving around as much. But of course, if you want to move, if you want to itch, if you want to scratch, you want to get up and go to the toilet, it's absolutely fine, okay? Because that's just going to help you to get even more comfortable, even more relaxed. And if you need to pop out of the room, you can just come back in and you can just go from wherever we're at. It's absolutely fine. So first of all, what we're going to do is, see, sometimes to be able to move on from a particular situation, we have to recognize what the lessons are from that. And, you know, we might be stuck in a position where we feel stressed out because we're blaming somebody else's behavior, we're blaming a situation. because of that, it has made me feel stressed. Because that person has acted in this way, I am now stressed out. Because that child hasn't handed the homework in, I'm now stressed out. It's almost like we give the responsibility to other people to determine how we think and feel about ourselves. We know that that's not true, but that's generally how we operate on a daily basis. So if we think about a particular situation that we felt stressed in, it's not very often we look back at it and think, well, what did I actually learn from that situation? And the moment we do it, the moment we go back to a situation and reflect on it, we can often then move on from it, right? If you've had like some argument with somebody, or even, told a child off, you want to move on from it by having that conversation, pointing out what your part in it was, pointing out what their part in it was. And it's really until you've accepted your own part that's when you can then move on from it, move away. And when we have this stress response, we're often firing off. It's often a trigger that's being fired off, because that's how we've always responded in situations like that event. We'll always respond in a stressful way because it's helped us out in the past. That's what helped us get through that situation that was similar to that. So we'll resort back to the same old behavior. But the moment we can look at it and keep the lessons and let the rest go, that's when we can change how we feel about the situation. And that's what's important. It's about changing that feeling so that we're no longer feeling that stress response. And then what it does, it teaches your unconscious to be able to move on from situations much quicker than what you might have been previously. So if we can keep the lessons and let the rest go, we can also then look at this evolving identity. Because if we're not saying, I am stressed out, well, what are we? Who are we? How are we going to be? What is the identity that you're going to take on board? What identity do you want to identify with? So we're just going to explore a little bit of that. And whatever comes up for you as an individual, just allow it to come through. Whatever comes up will be right for you. So first things first, be nice and comfortable, be relaxed. We are going to let the body relax, but first of all, we're just going to engage with that unconscious. We're going to let the unconscious come into this session and allow it to bring forth whatever it brings through. And I think some of you might have done something similar like this before, but it's really looking at it from a different perspective now in terms, if we think of stress. You've all got different scenarios, different examples of what it's been like in those moments where instead of seeing the glass half full, you've seen it half empty. We've all had those moments. So just right now, take a nice deep breath in and just let your eyes close down.